I'm your host, Brent Johnson. It is time for our monthly roundtable discussion. And we're going to be discussing the proper role of religion, if any, in a free society. Let me introduce our three panelists. First off, Constance Cumby is the author of the first major critical book about the New Age movement, The Hidden Dangers of the Rainbow, the New Age Movement in Our Coming Age of Barbarism, and A Planned Deception, the Staging of a New Age Messiah. Constance is a practicing attorney in Michigan. She has worked in government, politics, and law. She is a biblical scholar and staunch defender of Judeo-Christian values in the face of what she sees as a systematic attack on them by political special interest groups. Let's welcome our first panelist, Constance Cumby. Thanks for being part of today's roundtable panel discussion on the Global Freedom Report. How are you, Connie?
Well, fine, Brent. I trust you can hear me now. Can you hear me?
Yes, I hear you quite well and everything.
Fantastic. Okay, I'm doing well, thank you, and it's a pleasure to be with you today. I've admired your program for a long time.
Thank you. You used to work in both houses of the Michigan legislature. We hear a lot about the federal Congress, but seldom get insights into the state legislators. From your time in the Michigan House and Senate, what can you tell us about how state legislators view their roles in government, at least the ones with whom you've interacted? Do they think of themselves more as rulers or public servants? That's my question.
It depended on the individual. I was fortunate to work with a couple of fine ones who clearly considered themselves public servants. William A. Ryan, who was the Speaker of the Michigan House of Representatives. Jack Faxon, who gave me my original political job, also considered himself quite clearly a public servant. And then Senator Rozicki, who had me work for him on the Appropriations Committee of the Michigan State Senate. And those three gentlemen were there, but there were a fair share of men around there that considered themselves bluntly to be God.
Well, that's excellent that you've had that wide range of experience. Let me go on and introduce our next panelist. Born at sea to Palestinian refugee parents, Dr. Imad Adin Ahmad was raised in Pennsylvania. He graduated cum laude from Harvard in 1970 and in 1975 and earned a Ph.D. in astronomy and astrophysics from the University of Arizona. He holds a position as senior lecturer teaching honors courses in religion at the University of Maryland and will shortly begin an introductory course on Islam at the Wesley Theological Seminary. Dr. Ahmad is internationally renowned on matters relating to Islam and Muslims. He is the author of Signs in the Heavens, co-editor of Islam on the West, a dialogue, and co-author of Islam and the Discovery of Freedom. He is also an Islamic chaplain at American University and the Perkins Hospital, imam of the Dar al-Fikr Mosque, president of the Islamic American Zakat Foundation, and arbitrator for the Coordinating Council of Muslim Organizations in the Greater Washington metropolitan area. Among his numerous awards, he is the recipient of the Samuel P. Chase Freedom Award from the Libertarian Party of Maryland. Let's welcome our second panelist, Dr. Imad Adin Ahmad. It is a privilege to have you join us here for today's discussion on the Global Freedom Report.
Thank you. It's my pleasure to be with you.
My, oh my, it's a wonder you have, with all of your credentials and everything that you have accomplished, it's a wonder you have time to eat, much less time to spend with us here. How do you manage to participate on so many fronts in so many different areas without burning out, so to speak?
Well, I get a lot of support my local community and especially from my beloved wife, so it tends to make things a little bit easier.
You have definitely accomplished quite a lot, and I'm looking forward to having you participate in today's discussion. Our final panelist is Tanya Smith, who joined the board of the Atheist Alliance International in 2010, where she was just recently elected president. Tanya was one of the principal coordinators of the 2010 Global Atheist Convention, The Rise of Atheism, held in Melbourne, Australia, and has been a member of the Atheist Foundation of Australia's public relations team since 2009. By profession, Tanya is an investment banker specializing in mergers and acquisitions. Let's welcome our third panelist, Tanya Smith. Thanks for being with us here on the Global Freedom Report.
No problem at all. Thanks for having me.
Tanya, you organized the this 2010 Global Atheist Convention in Melbourne. I used to produce conventions and trade shows, and there's always some unanticipated crazy things that occur. Do you have a wild story, very briefly, you can tell us on radio from that event?
Actually, the whole thing was a big success, and everything went off reasonably smoothly. We did have a couple of technical problems on the day. We had just problems with the systems at the convention centre, problems with some of our staff accidentally disappearing and being assigned to other rooms in the convention centre. But we had a big team on it. Everyone worked together, and look, it was a big success. So I can't really say anything wild and crazy happened, and that's probably good. I'd like to think that's down to good planning.
Yeah, actually, that is a sign of good planning. But as a former convention promoter, I have to say it's something of a surprise because Murphy tends to be at work when we do these trade shows. But I'm very glad that it went well for you and that everything went as expected. Those are our panelists. I've had some questions from our panelists. Is this really international? So I just want to give you a little bit of a snapshot of what's going on right now. The studios of the Micro Effect Broadcast Network are in Idaho in the U.S. I personally am in New Zealand right now working on a movie. One of our panelists is in France. Our other two panelists are in the United States. One of them is in Maryland area. The other one is in the Michigan area. So yes, this is a major technological accomplishment that we have going here. And when it works, it's like out of the A-Team, Hannibal Smith. I love it when a plan comes together kind of stuff. A listener to the show sent me an email in which he expressed concern that religious fundamentalists of various faiths seem to think they have some kind of exclusive claim to freedom. This was his message. He said, "Hi. My suggestion is the question of whether overt religion from patriot commentators damages the discourse in the patriot community and drives away those who do not hold to the same beliefs. This comes from the fact that all you ever hear on many patriot radio shows and from patriot speakers is talk about a satanic conspiracy and how we need to bring this country back to its godly root. I'm not talking about the dominionists who make fools of themselves with every statement, but there are so many out there that end every sentence with praise God or praise Yahweh. They seem to think there are no pagan or atheist patriots." So his question got me thinking, how does religion fit in to the principles of a free society? And that's what we intend to explore over the next 90 minutes. Also, this is not about my religion is right and yours is wrong. Though many of us may feel that way, that's not what this is about. We need to seek unity through our common goal. Our common goal is to live free. All of us feel the same way, despite our many differences. So it is my hope that together we can come to some conclusions and understandings of each other that support us all in our mutual effort to live free. I want to start my questioning with Constance Cumby. And I'm going to ask each of you the same question, by the way, in this particular first question, except I'm going to change it with respect to what you represent. For Constance, what is the Judeo-Christian view on personal freedom? How does individual liberty reconcile with the principles of Judaism or Christianity?
Well, Scripture is very clear. Where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is liberty. And liberty is God gave us free choice. God created us with free choice. And how we want to use it, we can make choices that are good for ourselves. We can make choices that are harmful for ourselves. But a strict reading of Scripture indicates that there is free choice. Now, with free choice also comes consequences. And I personally believe that everybody has the right to one kind warning, at least from my perspective. After that, I'm not going to beat folks over the head with my version of the evidence.
So, okay. So, do you want to expand on that a little bit there? I mean, what happened? Well, for example, people have a right to one warning. That story I did earlier about the SWAT team.
Exactly. Everybody has a right to. If I would be very offended if somebody thought that I were in imminent danger, if I did not take a look at something, if I examined something, and they decided for whatever reason not to tell me. And I would be very offended if they didn't think I was worthy of hearing We all have a right to share our convictions. We all have a right to reject what is shared with us on convictions. I personally believe, I'm a lawyer, as you know, I personally believe that my people's rights stop where my nose begins, and my rights stop where their nose begins.
All right, now over to Dr. Ahmad. Same question, but with respect to Muslim. What is the Muslim view on personal freedom, and how does individual liberty reconcile with the principles of Islam?
Well, as you're well aware, Islam has come under a lot of attack and is subject to a lot of misunderstanding these days. So let me give you lesson number 1A in Islam 101. The fundamental teaching of Islam is the doctrine that there is none worthy of worship but God. That is to say, there is no God but God. And a necessary corollary of this is that there is none that is worthy to be the intermediary between the individual and the creator, the individual. That means that it is a general principle of Islamic law that every human being is directly responsible to the creator. That means that in a more expanded discussion of Islamic law, we individuals are God's agents on earth. Each one of us is responsible for his, her, or her actions. Therefore, there can be no justification for the imposition of one's worldview on another's. We are all independent agents. We have a duty to do, and yes, we will be held responsible for whether we've done that duty correctly or not by God. The only point that maybe has to be made is that Islam recognizes not only individual rights but collective communities that are spontaneously formed, and therefore.
Hang on, Dr. Ahmad, you somehow were fading away as if you were moving away from your microphone. Can you just repeat what you were just saying, please?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I said Islamic law recognizes not only individual rights but the social organizations that we belong to, and therefore Islamic law has always respected the rights of other non-Muslim communities, especially those of the fellow Abrahamic faiths, whose right to free exercise of religion is actually identified and specified in the Quran. Usually, Muslims have expanded this, to other communities as well. And where individual Muslims or Muslim leaders or Muslim groups fail to recognize that autonomy of individuals and freely formed groups, that is a violation of the fundamental teaching of this most basic Islam. If you don't know anything about Islam but this, you have to know it teaches there is none worthy of worship but God.
Now, I'm just curious. It sounds like Islam teaches that each individual has a direct relationship with God. Is that, in other words, if you're going to speak God, you're going to speak God?
Well, I mean a direct responsibility to God. Muslims do recognize the prophets, and we believe not only in the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, who belief in Muhammad constitutes being a member of the Muslim religious community as it's usually conceived, but we also believe in Jesus, peace be upon him, and Moses, peace be upon him, and Abraham, peace be upon him, and not only the couple of dozen prophets named by name in the Quran, but actually we're taught that God has sent messengers to every people throughout history, up until Muhammad, who we believe was the last messenger and whose word has been preserved and published, whose revelation from God has been preserved and published
in the Quran. And so an imam is not the Muslim equivalent of, say, a pope.
Not at all, not even of a priest. In Islam, the imam, which is a Arabic word that literally means the one who stands in front, is simply the one who stands in front of the prayers, leading the prayers. But the imam faces in the same direction as everybody else and does all the same gestures and words, etc., as everybody else in the congregation.
Excellent. Over to Tanya. Now, Tanya, I'm going to ask you the same basic question. What is the atheist or humanist view on personal freedom, and how does individual liberty recognize with the principles of atheism or humanism?
Sure. Well, personal freedom fits very comfortably with atheism and humanism. We see that as a free society, there would be freedom for people to be religious or not religious. It's a private matter, and the government would stay out of it. Government would be secular, i.e. neutral between religious and non-religious views, not favouring or disadvantaging anybody on the basis of whether they happen to be religious or not religious. Atheists support a society that is based on reason and evidence. Such a society should be one that is conducive to freedom, happiness and stability, because reason and evidence leads to the kind of society that people generally want to live in. The basic principles of humanism or secular ethics are around the right to treatment with respect and dignity for all humans, the right to liberty, to economic freedom, to a fair trial, to freedom of speech, to all the basic human rights, and the consideration that all humans should be treated equally, regardless of their gender, race, sexual orientation or religious views. Now, these are the kinds of rights that most people support, regardless of whether or not.
Now, let me ask for a clarification there. First, if you talked about economic freedom, what exactly does that mean?
Well, the right to undertake jobs that you like any particular time you like. For example, one of the economic restrictions, perhaps if you look at Jewish people, they're not supposed to work for one day out of 7. That is a restriction on your economic freedom, because there are certain jobs you couldn't do if you couldn't work for one day out of 7. That's one example.
Okay. And then the other thing I wanted to get a clarification on is that you talk about everyone is equal. Now, I know that, I believe everyone has equal rights, but I don't happen to believe everybody is equal. You're a woman, I'm a man, I'm a skilled broadcaster, you skilled in other things. In other words,
Sure.
We're not the same people.
No, of course
So what
not.
exactly is meant from your perspective when you say we are all equal?
I think it comes down to the basic principle of how you treat people. There are times that you need to treat people differently, and you gave an obvious one. If we applied for a job in broadcasting, clearly you should beat me out every time because you've got skills that are relevant to the job. The question is, if we went for a job and you got it just because you're a man and I didn't get it just because I was a woman, then that's not treating us equally.
Or the reverse.
Or the reverse.
Or the reverse. You're a woman and for no
Of
other
course. Of course. Unfortunately, that's not the history. Well, actually, unfortunately, that's not the history, and it wouldn't be necessarily any better if it was the other way around either. But in the absence of a reason why, and in some cases where there are reasons why, people should be treated equally on gender, race, sexual orientation, and so forth. And so I start from the principle that you treat people equally, and then if there is a reason not to, then fine. Let's talk about that. But it's got to be a reason based on reason and evidence.
Okay. Now, the U.S. Declaration of Independence says that you are endowed by your Creator with certain unalienable rights. From the atheist humanist perspective, what is the source of rights? In other words, we say, hey, we have a right to be free, but from whence come those rights?
You get those rights simply by being a human and being in a society of other humans. We have derived and evolved into a society where we need to work and live cooperatively with each other. There's clearly far too many of us to work in any other way. So we evolved to live in communities and work together because doing so conferred a greater prospect of survival. So societies are happier, they are more stable and more productive, where basic human rights, like the ones I've outlined, are respected. You can look at countries around the world to see that. The happier, the stable, the democracies of the world tend to be more stable. And it's not that these rights are bestowed on us by any particular supernatural being. It's that these are the rights that will result in a happy, functioning society, and that's what most of us want to be part of.
Constance, from whence comes the right to live free? What is the source of fundamental human rights?
I think we're all created, personally as a Christian, I believe we're all created in God's image and that God gave us as our Declaration of Independence. And it said certain inalienable rights, which among them are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. But again, where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is liberty. And I have to believe, my personal belief is that we are created of God and that He did create us with minds. He did create us with free choice. and he did create us with duties to use them responsibly. And I think that very often if a society believes that they have evolved and that some people are more evolved than others, it is easier to rationalize away human rights than if people have a shared belief that they are created in the image of God. People have a right to believe what they want to believe, but is that belief going to be blessed?
All right, over to Dr. Ahmad. Same basic question. What's under Islam teachings? What is the source of your rights? We've all agreed that we all think that we have the right to be free. So from whence comes that right or those rights?
Well, as I've said, we Muslims believe that God has created us for a purpose, and there's an interesting story in the Quran describing the creation of man that sheds light on this question.
Pardon me. Whoever has a cell phone going off in the background, please remove it from the room or turn it off. Thank you very much. Dr. Ahmad, my apologies. Please, would you resume?
Sure. In the Quran, there's a story about when God creates man. He tells the angels, I'm going to create a vicegerent on the earth. And the angels are baffled by this. They say, are you going to create a being who is going to do mischief and shed blood while we celebrate your holy name? In other words, his identification, they're identifying man, contrasting man who has free will with themselves who can only do what they're commanded to do. According to the Quran, God's response is to say, I know what you do not know. And he asks
pardon me, this is really important. Somebody has a cell phone going on.
It's not a cell phone.
Is there a way to turn that off? Because, okay. Yeah, because that really, what you're saying, I think, is very important, and unfortunately can't hear it when that's going on. Dr. Ahmad, would you continue, please?
Thank you. He then asks the angels to tell him the nature of things, and the angels respond, we only know what you tell us. He then creates Adam, and he's into Adam his spirit, which is to say the rational, volitional spirit. Again,
I'm sorry, Dr. Ahmad. Speak into the microphone, please, a little louder.
Okay. He breathes into him his spirit, and the rational, volitional spirit that is part of human nature. And Adam tells angels the nature of things. God says, I told you that I know what you do not know. And that the implication here is that man is a rational, volitional creature who has been given the ability to choose freely. Now, the next verse is very provocative. God then commands the angels to bow down to Adam. This is counterintuitive to people who tend to think the angels are above man. But contrary, God says man is above the angels because the angels do what God commands because they have no choice. Man having the ability to choose to do what is right, even though he is volitionally free to do what is wrong, puts him above the angels. And this is, I think, the lesson for human beings. And again, the corollary is that we are all the direct agents of God, and we cannot become slaves to one another. That is a violation of our mission on earth.
And I have never heard this word, so I need to ask you, vicegerent?
Yeah, vicegerent could be translated, the word in Arabic is khalifa. It's a name that you may have heard in history was appropriated by the rulers of the Muslim world. But in the Quran, the word khalifa, which literally means, comes from the root word, which means successor. It means an agent, someone who is appointed or deputized to do the work of somebody else. Man is the deputy of God to do God's work on earth. And it's in the Quran, it refers only to individuals, men and women. We are God's Khalifa.
Now, and interesting, there's some dialogue going on in the chat room between the panelists. And an interesting comment that I found there was that that freedom, that religions provide restrictions on freedom. That, I mean, it might be something that you like the restriction, you might be happy with it, but nonetheless, it is a restriction. Is freedom a qualified principle? Is freedom something that means you're free to do absolutely anything at all? Or does freedom have a more restrictive meaning? Dr. Ahmad first.
Yes, well, as I think was implied by what I just said, man is put on earth to be self-governing. That means that, yes, we have the freedom in the sense that God has allowed us the latitude by which we may do what is right or what is wrong. But that doesn't mean that he has not commanded us to do what is right. He has commanded us to do what is right. However, unless the wrongdoing involves the harming of other people, in which, of course, they have the right to defend themselves, it is our responsibility to enforce that code of what is right and what is wrong. For example, a person can, let's say, feel that he can enjoy life by, let's say, abusing drugs. That is his choice, but he will not escape the consequences of it, certainly not in this life, nor we Muslims believe in the next. But it is a fact that he has the ability to choose between those two choices. If one joins a religious community that says, do not abuse drugs, then that is to the benefit of the individual who has done so. I'll give you the obvious example for Muslims is the worst, most damaging drug, well, except for tobacco in the United States, is alcohol. 99% of all drug deaths are due to tobacco or alcohol. If one becomes a Muslim, then one has accepted that God has commanded us not to drink
alcohol. Our three panelists are Dr. Imad Adin Ahmad, who is representing the Muslim perspective, and I'm not going to go down his laundry list of accomplishments, but he is a teacher, a lecturer, an author, a chaplain, and has received just about every award out there, including the Libertarian Samuel P. Chase Freedom Award. Tanya Smith, president of the Atheist Alliance International. She is representing the atheist and humanist perspective, and Constance Cumby, who is host of My Perspective on the Micro Effect Broadcast Network, and author, practicing attorney, and biblical scholar who is standing for Judeo-Christian values. Welcome back, panelists. And Tanya, this little chat that was going on between the panelists in the chat area was talking about restrictions and freedom, and I was just talking with Dr. Ahmad about that. From an atheist perspective, should freedom be completely unrestricted? I mean, freedom in its most extreme version is I'm free to do anything, including kill and rape and kinds of nasty stuff.
Look, I don't think there are many people who support anarchy, which is pretty much what you're saying, whether they're atheists or otherwise. Yeah, I certainly don't. The logical consequence of thinking about what kind of society is happy, stable, and productive is that you need rules that restrict individual freedom to the extent required to ensure the protection of others. You need rules that protect personal safety, killing, injuring others. That's generally illegal in most countries. You need rules about property protection. Stealing is generally illegal in most countries. The atheist perspective is simply that you don't need to consult a book to find out that these actions are wrong. We know that these are wrong because we're humans. Humans are social creatures. We want to live in a cooperative society. So we're quite happy to agree to those kinds of rules and think that those rules make sense. We just don't need a book to tell us that.
Now, you just made a comment about how you are not supportive of anarchy. What systems of government are harmonious with the precepts of humanism and atheism, in your opinion?
A secular democracy. That is the most logical structure for government. I mean, democracy because it certainly promotes happiness and stability, and you can see that from examples around the world. Secular democracy, that is the only system that in the long run protects the rights of the religious and the non-religious alike. Because a secular democracy says You have the freedom to be religious. You have the freedom to not be religious. The government will neither favour you nor disadvantage you on the basis of your religion or the absence of any religion. That's fair to everybody, and that should promote a stable society.
Now, not to let you off too easy on this.
Sure.
You speak about a democracy, but in a democracy, 51% of the people get what they want, but 49% don't. So, for example, if you had a majority of the people who decided that, well, you can't worship Yahweh, then that
Sure.
would be the rule of a democracy.
But that's why I said secular democracy. Secular democracy should have the right to be religious and to not be religious and all the other things I talked about enshrined in the Constitution. I mean, what you're saying also is that if 51% of the voters in the US suddenly decide that Sharia law is a great idea, then the rest of the society
Exactly.
and that is obviously not right. And I wouldn't support that. I don't think, well, short of the people who want Sharia law, I don't think anybody would support that. That's why I said a secular democracy. You need secularism at the basis to protect all people, religious and non-religious alike, because you never know when you're going to be in the majority.
Dr. Ahmad, is Sharia law the only system of government that is harmonious with the precepts of Islam, or is it broader than that? Is it not as simple as that?
Well, the problem here is understanding of what Sharia law consists of. The concept of Sharia law. Let me take you back to the meaning of the word again. Sometimes the root meaning of Arabic words gives some insight. The word Sharia does not mean law. It means the path to the water. And this may seem very strange. Why would something that literally means the path to the water be used as a synonym for Islamic law? And the reason is understandable if we step back, ask what is the nature of law. In the sciences, we understand that law is a given. It is something that is in nature, and that the humans don't invent law. What we do is we seek to discover it. This law can be considered God-given if you believe in God, or just a natural law that is what it is if you don't believe in God. But either way, the job of the scientist is not to invent it, but to find out what it is. Well, Sharia law is the same thing. Like the path to the water, which is so important, especially people in the desert where not only Islam but many of the Abrahamic faiths started out, the path to the well is really important, and it's something that you've got to figure out and map out in order to share with other people. Being able to have that map is a human endeavor, although we believe as Muslims, assisted by God's revelation. But even when God assists us with a revelation, we still have to interpret and understand that revelation. Therefore, I say that the Sharia, like the laws of physics, say the law of gravity, is something not to be imposed, but something to be obeyed. Within that context, then, there is really no significant difference in principle between Sharia law and what Jefferson referred to as the laws of God and the laws of nature and God and God's nature. The
laws of nature, and nature's God.
Nature's God. These are something that we have to understand correctly. So, unfortunately, there are a lot of fanatical Muslims who have an understanding of Sharia, which may or may not be in accord with a traditional understanding, but who nonetheless feel that they have a right to impose it on others. And to me, that's as stupid as saying you're going to impose the law of gravity on someone. We just have to understand that we have to try to understand and obey God's laws in order that we may succeed.
So
now,
what system of government does Islam provide for or allow for?
Well, because the interpretation of God's law has been a matter of human endeavor throughout history, there is a very broad variety of systems that have been accepted. There are, however, certain...
Pardon me, Dr. Ahmad, you're probably turning your head away from your microphone.
No, actually, the microphone's a headset. That I think what may be happening is it may be dropping a little bit.
Yeah, bring it up right to your mouth there, please.
Okay, I'll try to hold it then.
Thank you.
So when you look at Muslim history, you'll find there have been a variety of forms of government. But I think what's more important than the forms of government are the principles. You were talking about, I think correctly, that in its crudest understanding, a democracy is where the majority rules, and that is not something that leads to necessarily a free society. To the contrary, it leads to the tyranny of the majority. Instead, any system, including a democracy, has to be limited by certain understandings of fundamental human rights that the ruler, whether that ruler is an autocrat or a majority, can't take away. Now, what are these rights? Well, that is something that can be understood by rational analysis, but is also something that can be understood by contemplation of God's revealed text. In this respect, there's an interesting Islamic philosopher named Ibn Nafis, who wrote a story called The Story of Perfect. It was about a perfect reasoning being who was born spontaneously generated on an island. And by studying the laws of nature, he derives all the sciences on his own. He even comes to the conclusion that there must be a God who has created the universe, but he can't understand whether this God should be worshipped since he sees no advantage. God needs no worship, and he sees no advantage to him in worshiping God, although he's inclined to do so simply because this creator seems to be really marvelous in what he's created. At the end of the story, he meets some human beings who are shipwrecked on the island, goes to their native land, and observes human beings interacting with one another. And by observing them, he deduces all the laws of sociology, psychology, economics, and politics, etc., and the rules of a free society. But he realizes that human beings, unlike him, are not perfect reasoners, and they may not arrive at the same conclusions he does. And furthermore, even if they do, they're weak and may be tempted to violate those laws when they think it's in their material self-interest. Better, he realizes, for God to send a series of prophets who confirms to them the same principles and warns them that they must obey these rules to treat others as they would be treated in order for society to prosper and in order for them to prosper as individuals.
Excellent. Thank you. Constance.
Yeah.
From a Judeo-Christian perspective, what are the types of governments, what systems of governments are harmonious with those precepts? What type of government?
Well, originally, when God was revealing himself to the Israelites, he discouraged the notion of kingdoms, and Israel had judges that would judge disputes. And then he allowed a king when the Israelites persisted, and Saul was the first king. And monarchies can be, if monarchies can be God ordained, and often are God ordained. Also, societies without monarchies, a system like we have, where we have judges and elected officials. Again, where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is liberty. And a totalitarian ruler, totalitarian system of government, or you could have a mobocracy, where people are not permitted. The majority tells the minority, you may have no right. And those would all be outside the realm of Judeo-Christian orthodoxy, in my opinion.
Are there, again, in your opinion, obviously, but are there restrictions on the type of governments that you might be able to have given a Judeo-Christian ethic? Are there certain types of governments that simply cannot be?
I don't know of any, per se, a government that would demand that we worship a God whom to us would be a false God, would be a false government that would be fostering a false religion, in my opinion. For example, on the plain of Shinar in ancient Babylon, when they were forced to, everybody was forced to bow down and worship the king. Worship is accorded to nobody but God. I would agree with our Muslim panelists on this. A government that crosses the line and compels people to do things against their conscience would not be a godly ordained government.
Okay, now, Constance, on a follow-up, what is the Judeo-Christian view on law and justice? How is society supposed to deal with people who violate its laws?
There were a number of rules on it, and then of course there was Jesus' Sermon on the Mount, and blessed are the merciful, for they shall obtain mercy. There were some strict rules given for society, but there also was a place for justice. There also was a place for mercy.
Okay. All right. That's
just a libertine thing where obviously anybody can go in and grab anything anybody has, or somebody can go in and compel obeisance. Would not be a God-blessed system, at least as I see it. And I certainly don't pretend to speak for the entire Judeo-Christian world, but based on my understanding of some very clear scriptures, that's how I would see it.
And if from the same perspective, what is the appropriate response to the people, okay, when their society is not adhering to the proper principles?
There's going to have to be times when you resist. There's going to have to be times when you say no. There may be even times when you might have to fight to preserve liberties or an oppressive government. Those times have come and gone in history, and they've been sometimes God ordained.
We're going to take a break from our panel discussion and visit with our panelist, Constance Cumby. You are the host of the show My Perspective on the Micro Effect Broadcast Network. Isn't that right?
I've been hosting that program for the last 4 years, yes. Thank you.
Yeah, tell us about the show.
Well, we're on twice a week with Joe McNeil's network, of course. Prior to that, I had a program in Detroit for 13 years called My Law Talk, where we shared legal perspective, and of course I shared my opinions on the world. And prior to that, I had a career as an author and lecturer for 7 years, but I've been an attorney for the last 36 years. So we try to solve the problems of the world. We have various guests, and I have tried to focus in on one of my main interests and my main concerns, which has been the New Age movement and its various manifestations, which these days is sometimes called global civil society and public theology. But my concerns about efforts to, by some in the world, I'm not accusing any of our present guests here of that, but there are some who would like to seek a new world religion where everybody is fused into one with common beliefs and no right to hold our own individual beliefs. And I've tried to share my concerns on that with what's happening and frankly, scriptural ramifications. I am a believer, an unapologetic believer. I've had too much happen to me personally to not believe. And so we discuss those and, frankly, try to solve the problems of the world. And
the show, by the way, airs right after this show on Tuesdays and Thursdays. That's 7 to 8 Eastern Time, 4 to 5 Pacific Time in the United States. And just tune into the Global Freedom Report and just keep listening, and you'll end up with Constance's show. How do people get a hold of your books or find out more about those and about the work you do?
I have a very active blog spot where we have very active forums, and my friends and my enemies both come over and participate, and that's worldwideweb.cumbey, CUMBEY.blogspot.com. I Twitter occasionally when I remember to do it, and I'm on Facebook, but the main forum where people can reach me is through the blog spot.
Excellent.
And a number of resources, including both of my books, are available for free download.
Excellent.
One of my books, The Hidden Dangers of the Rainbow, is translated into several languages, and it was an international bestseller. It was the first major critical look at the New Age movement. But I have that book available in PDF form for free download.
All right, let me give that website again. It's www.cumbey, CUMBEY.blogspot.com. Dr. Imad Adin Ahmad, you have so much that you have done that I hardly even know where to begin. what is the best way for people? You said at the very beginning that there is there's so many attacks on Islam and on Muslims because it's become the politically correct thing to do in many parts of the world. How do people break through all of the veneer, the facade, the illusion that has been put out there by the PC crowd to find out really what Islam is about?
Well, I can recommend that they can start by going to our website, minaret.org, and from there you'll find links. In fact, there's a links page that'll send you to hundreds of sites that are appropriate and helpful, as well as to our own blog, where we put out daily news and analysis links to interesting stories about Islam and the Muslim world and about Muslims in the United States and elsewhere. Also publishes blogs that I have written on various issues of interest, and links to other projects of ours. For example, there's a television program called The Scholar's Chair. People can watch episodes online, linking from our website to them. There are books that one can recommend I can recommend to people. If you're interested in a basic introduction to Islam, John Esposito's Islam, the Straight Path, an introduction to the connection between Islam and liberty, I would recommend a book called Islam and the Discovery of Freedom. It was originally a chapter in a book by the great libertarian Rose Wilder Lane, but in this version it has a running commentary by yours truly that gives the historical and scriptural citations to back up Ms. Lane's fundamental premise. For those who are interested in what I'm really interested in, the fascinating subject relationship of science and religion, I'll recommend my book, Signs in the Heavens, a Muslim astronomer's perspective on religion and science, to which a link from the website can also be gained.
That was the other question. From the website, can people find out how to get your books and such?
Yes, there are links to the books, and most of the books are also available on Amazon.com and other sources. I
noticed you got the Samuel P. Chase Freedom Award from the Libertarian Party of Maryland. How does your work with Islam jive with libertarianism?
Well, I've been a libertarian activist since I was certainly in college, almost since I was in high school. I've been active with the Libertarian Party, although I have to be clear and say that's a different hat than I wear when I'm doing my academic work, since that's obviously partisan political.
Right.
However, the connection between Islam and libertarianism for me is very fundamental. My work for the Minaret of Freedom Institute, which is the libertarian Islamic think tank that I founded, has a fourfold mission: to counter the distortions about Islam, to show the origins of certain modern values that have come out of Islamic civilization, and to educate both Muslims and non-Muslims on the importance of liberty and free markets, and to advance the status of Muslims whether they live in the East or the West. So for myself, speaking personally, the Quran has had a fundamental influence in placing me in the position of being an advocate for liberty. There is a fundamental verse of the Quran that says, "Let there be no compulsion in religion." And you must understand that for a Muslim, Islam is not a religion in the narrow ritualistic sense. Islam is a religion in the sense of being a way of life. And that means that this verse means, let there be no coercion in your way of life.
All right, let's talk to Tanya for a couple minutes. Tanya, thanks for being patient. What is on the horizon for Tanya Smith and the Atheist Alliance International? Tell us something about the organization, if you would.
Sure. Well, Atheist Alliance International promotes the use of reason and evidence to form public policy, and it fights against the intrusion of religion in the lives of people who don't want it. So we're a group that stands up for the non-believers, and we're a network of other atheist free thought groups around the world. So our members comprise of individuals but also other groups. For example, the Atheist Foundation of Australia, which I'm also a member of, is a member of Atheist Alliance International. We publish a magazine, a fantastic magazine called Secular World, which comes out quarterly and all members receive it. We organise conventions and help other groups to organise conventions around the world. We support the start-up new atheist and free thought groups in developing countries. So in the last year, we've supported conferences in Gambia and Kenya. We've also facilitated member donations to the Kazizi Humanist Primary School in Uganda. So we're an organisation that helps other organisations be more effective, and we also stand up ourselves. So I think we've got a lot of work ahead of us. We're just in the process, actually, of an internal restructuring. The old Atheist Alliance International was a US-based organisation, and it had a whole range of different members, and it had grown. It was a success. It had grown to the point where it made sense to split it up into the two parts, the American-focused part and the international part, and we just launched the new part at the World Atheist Convention.
And you were just elected president. Congratulations.
Thank you very much. So we support the separation of church and state. So if you want people to be free to be religious or non-religious with no benefits or disadvantages either way, I hope people will support us. They can join as a member or donate at www.atheistalliance.org.
Excellent. And we'll give out all that contact info for all of you before we get to the end of the show. Not to worry there. What is the proper role, if any, for religion to play in a free society? Constance, is there a proper role for religion in a free society?
I would agree that separation of church and state can be very important. My issue with many has been that they would like to disqualify Christians and those with a Christian worldview from participation in state. And certainly religion has been very important for defining the moral views of people and also people's willingness to cooperate with rules necessary to ensure a peaceful society. That any one religion should be running the state, I think that's a very dangerous ground. There are no perfect churches because there are no perfect people. We Christians, Jews, and Muslims all share a worldview that we're fallen human beings and that none of us are perfect. And so, but we have freedom of religion, but it's not necessarily freedom from religion. And there are people who would like to say if somebody believes that abortion is a sin, that they have no right to hold public office, that should disqualify them. I never thought I would see the day when it would come to be controversial to think that marriage should be a heterosexual affair. But these days, people are being considered disqualified from public office if they hold views that were traditional for thousands of years. And it was a traveler to the United States, and his name just slipped from my grasp, and it's going to come back as fast as it left. But he said that America was good because America was great because America was good. When America ceased to be good, America would cease to be great. But one of the reasons that many people were good was they did have a belief that God was there and that they had to answer to God. And I think it's going to be very sad when that is erased. And unfortunately, there are people out there who would like to see it erased. I'm not accusing our present panelists of holding that belief, but there are people who have held a militant atheist belief, and when that has happened, it has not been very nice for Christians. And three things I can think. Of course, we had the communist regime. We had Mexico from 1926 to 1935. We had Spain during the, quote, republic, unquote, and and we had the French Revolution. And when those times came, it was a very, very bloody time for people who held the traditional beliefs in God. And there are people, unfortunately, in society now who would like to see those times come again. And if those times come, it's going to be a sad day for the world.
Thank you. Dr. Ahmad, is there an appropriate place, an appropriate role for religion in a free society?
Yes, I believe there is. I think when we look at this word secularism, we have to understand there are two different ways of interpreting it. One way in which secularism is a good thing is where it stands for the dual principles of free exercise of religion and no state establishment of religion. This is the actually constitutional view in America of what a secular society should be. These things are positive for not only for the society but for religion itself. I think that we must observe that of all the developed countries, the United States is the one that is the most passionately religious among its people. While there is a separation of church and state in the way I've defined it, there is no separation whatsoever of religion and politics. People bring their religious views into their political lives and their political activities, even to the point where we have had a Catholic priest as a member of Congress. However, in some parts of the world, notably in France, and I would add until recently in Turkey, there has been a view that secularism means no religion in public life, that people are supposed to check their religious beliefs at the door of the church or the mosque or at the door of their home. And this is absurd. Religion plays, as I have tried to outline, a very important role in encouraging us to be ethical people, in realizing that it's not just that the right thing to do is the rational thing to do, but that there is no disparity between what is right in general and in principle and what is good for the individual. Religion drives that point home, and it makes the point in a way that you don't have to be a genius to understand it. Even the masses can understand the homilies in the church that make these points.
Thank you, Dr. Ahmad. Tanya, the same question for you. Is there an appropriate place for religion in a free society? And I understand that you're an atheist and you do not subscribe to a particular religion, but that doesn't mean that you're not qualified to answer that question.
Not at all. I'm part of society. I'm affected by laws that are influenced by religion, and therefore I certainly have a strong view on this. In a free society, there should be free people to be religious or not religious. It would be a private matter. Essentially, religion would be something that adults could choose to participate in, like sports or whatever political party you happen to support. I think the critical issue here is secularism, and the issue here is not basing laws on God says. That is not an argument. That is an assertion. And the issue here is to make sure that the laws that apply to everybody, the non-religious and the religious, are not based on any particular religious views. So, for instance, mentioned same-sex marriage, you mentioned abortion. I have absolutely no issue with somebody saying, my God says I shouldn't have an abortion. That's fine. It's not compulsory. But I have very strong objection to any law that says I can't have an abortion because I'm not religious. I'm not interested in what God may or may not think about what I do. Same issue with same-sex marriage. I have no issue with religious groups saying we won't marry same-sex couples in our church, in our mosque, in our synagogue. That's fine. When it comes to civil marriage, which is a state issue, God says is not an argument. So Constance made common and unjustified reference to communism, implying that if, quote, militant atheists get their way, that might be where we're heading. Communism is a totalitarian regime. I advocated secular democracy. I don't think you'll find too many people who want to head back to communism or a totalitarian regime. It's also funny to notice how only atheists are ever called militant. You don't tend to hear it applied to other people. Atheists
wait. We hear militant Muslims every other word on mainstream.
Maybe in the US you do. And look, clearly people who want to fly planes into buildings, I think, probably deserve it. But atheists stand up for the right to not be religious. There is nothing militant about standing up for your right to not be religious.
Fair statement. Let me follow up with that, because both Constance and Dr. Ahmad in their last responses mentioned something having to do with morals. America is great because America is good. When America fails to be good, it will fail to be great. What about the moral background question? Now, the one thing that Christianity, Judaism, Islam offer those who are believers is whether you agree with it or not is not the issue. these believers are offered a fundamental moral background. This is your formula for correct behavior. This is your formula for incorrect behavior. When you remove that moral background, how does the atheist or the humanist address these issues? And let me before I turn it over to you, let me say that I have personally a problem when somebody says, well, now everything is okay with someone, therefore nothing should ever be wrong.
I agree with your last statement. The argument that morality derives from any particular religion is an argument put forward by religious people who want to claim credit for basic goodness of humanity, and sometimes people who ignore the critical role of the Age of Enlightenment, which actually argued against Christianity. If you believe Christianity, or indeed any other religion, brought morality to humans, then are you really saying that until a couple of thousand years ago, humans were wandering and thinking it was all fine to kill people and steal? And they needed, Moses, in the case of Christians, to go up to Mount Sinai and get told that it was wrong. But I am what is generally considered to be a good person. I don't want to kill people. I don't want to rape people. I don't want stealing. I don't want to hurt people. All these sorts of things. I'm a very normal, good person. I do not believe in any God. And I don't need to believe in any God to be a good person. I do these things because I'm a human. I want to be part of a happy and stable society.
However, the fact that you are a good human, I personally have met, good Christian, what I'd call good people who are Christian, and I've also met real scum who call themselves Christian. I'd imagine if you look in the Muslim community, you would find some people who are good people and some people who are just plain not. And I would think the same is true in any community at all. So I appreciate that you're a good person, and therefore you don't see the need for any kind of somebody out there telling you how to behave, because you're respectful and you're honorable. But not everybody is. So what do you do for your society in order to establish a standard for what is right and what is wrong?
I think this goes back to what we were talking about earlier. The basis of personal rights and personal responsibilities comes back to what you need to build a stable society, regardless of which religion or non-religion you are. You can go back to things like personal security, property protection. These are the rules that you need to build a happy, stable and productive society, and those are the ones that we should have. All I'm saying is you don't need a book to tell you these things are right. You can work them out for yourself just by being a human and being part of a society. So not only that, I would actually like to, I always like to pose this question. Now, we've got, an atheist, a Christian, and a Muslim. Let's imagine we woke up tomorrow and we're all wrong and the Hindus have got it right. It doesn't really matter, just somebody other than us. Are you still going to be a nice person? Are you still going, or are you suddenly going to go, oh, well, the Christian God doesn't exist. It's suddenly okay to go out and kill. It's not. It's not okay. It's not okay because you're a human. I'm just saying people attribute value to the morality from their religion, but that's not really where it comes from.
And you make a great point. I will concede the point, but by the same token, even if your morality, if you're saying morality does not come from some particular standard, some particular faith, it's got to come from someplace. How do you know what's right and what's wrong? And then I'm going to take this question over to the other panelists.
Sure. I think what is right and wrong is what promotes a stable and productive society. We all want to live in a stable and productive society. We've evolved this way because if we live in a happy, stable and productive society, there's the best chance of our genes going to the next generation. So the things that work for us as humans are the things that promote stability within our society.
Dr. Ahmad, how do we establish standards that will allow us to live with each other while maintaining different beliefs and different faiths? How do we establish those social standards?
I think that religion has played that role. I think we should not overlook the enormous similarities among religions. Thomas Jefferson, I think, was the one who expressed the desire that people would only abide by those things which all religions have in common. They have much more in common than they have in differences. What makes religion is so vital is not what it says is right and wrong, which I agree a rational mind could arrive at the same conclusion provided they didn't make any errors in their reasoning. The problem is not that. The problem is who enforces this morality? I think that we have to appreciate what Tony Sullivan, professor at the University of Michigan, called the dark side of the Enlightenment that illustrates this point. When people believe in God, or it could be the Hindus too, why I wouldn't behave any differently if I were to wake up and find out the Hindus are right is because of the concept of karma, which achieves the same purpose as the concept of heaven and hell. I wouldn't want to be born into another life punished for something I've done in this, as I would not want to be in the hereafter punished for something I've done in this life. Rather, the important issue is that there is an enforcer. If you do not believe that it is an absolute certainty of karma or heaven and hell or whatever it is that's the manifestation of your belief in God, then you end up like Hobbes, believing that instead what we need is a Leviathan state. You end up like the French Revolution that proposed the church for its excesses, but resulted in the reign of terror. When people use the word terrorism, Muslims, I like to remind them that the word was originated in the West out of the French Revolution to describe the behavior of the French state as it sought to replace the function of religion through the state. These are the things that we need to be aware of. I repeat what I said at the beginning. God intended us to be self-governing. In order to be self-governing, we have to have a firm conviction in our hearts that right will prevail and wrong will not.
Thank you, Dr. Ahmad. Doggy, no barking. Stop it. All right. Final thoughts, please. Let us start with Constance. Constance, your final thoughts on the overall topic.
Well, I found myself nodding in agreement with an awful lot of what Dr. Ahmed had to say, with the exception of his belief, his expression that sometimes karma the belief in karma could be beneficial. I've found that people who believe in karma usually believe that what happened to people was the result of bad choices they made in earlier lives.
Got to make these quick comments. We're just about out of time, Constance. Last thoughts.
Okay. My last thought is, I think I agree with Dr. Ahmed. Religion has played an indispensable role in shaping what benefits we do have in society.
Excellent. Thank you. Tanya, 30 seconds. Last thought.
You don't need religion to be free. In fact, it's quite the opposite. It tells you what to think. It tells you what to do. You might be happy with those restrictions, and that's up to you. But for the rest of us, tell us what to do.
Thank you. Final thoughts, Dr. Ahmad. Well, my religion tells me to think for myself. And my religion tells me that we are all self-responsible people, directly responsible to our Creator. And to me, that's the path to freedom.
Thank you, all three of the panelists. Dr. Imad Adin Ahmad, www.minaret.org. Constance Cumby, www.cumby.blogspot.com. And Tanya Smith, www.atheistalliance.org. Thank you, all three of you. It's been a wonderful panel, and we really, really appreciate it. And if any of you want, I will be happy to send you an audio file of the entire show. Thank you all for being with us.